Reggie here, your friendly neighborhood bodybuilder and comic book collector, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. In this video, we are going to look at the top 10 most submitted books into CGC for the month of November. And as a reminder, this video is designed to be a leading indicator of ultimately what will come out into the market in some form or fashion. This data is not available anywhere else, including in the CGC census, as this data comes directly from CGC prior to these books being graded, thus loaded to the census. So this is a great leading indicator of what is to come. So I wanted to provide that background if you are a first-time viewer. If you are someone that watches this series on a regular and ongoing basis, you know what to expect, but I wanted to make sure that I cover my bases. Before we get to the list, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the sponsor of this video, HipComic. HipComic is a great platform for buying and selling comics, and what's great about them is that they work with small businesses and local comic shops to provide them the tools that they need to be successful in the digital age. This website is built by collectors for collectors, and there is a link in the description of this video. I encourage you to head over and check out their inventory because I don't think that you're going to be disappointed. With that said, let's get to the list. Number 10 was the only book to make the extended list last month. And the extended list is the top 20 books that are sent into CGC. So this book was on the top 20. Now it's actually in the top 10. And technically, it is also the only DC book on the entire list. We are, of course, talking about Nice House on a Lake, issue number 1. There are currently roughly 900 copies of this book on the CGC census, with the vast majority of them being a blue label 9.6 or 9.8. There are only about 5% of the total books on the census that are actually yellow label. Again, the vast majority of them are blue label and higher grade at that. The 1-year average for this comic is $123. The 30-day average is only $91 for a 9.8. So this is still a book that is relatively lower in value. There are a healthy number of them out there. And so if this is something that you want to add to your collection, you can either roll the dice and send it in and take that chance, or you can buy one for, honestly, a couple of bucks. Number 9 on the list is holding on to this position for the second month in a row. Now, what isn't holding on are the values for this book, and we are talking about Venomlethal Protector, issue number 1. The 30-day average for this book has slipped from $170 last month to $158 this month against an FMV of $200. This trend doesn't necessarily bode well for those folks that still have copies at CGC. It could, however, mean that now is a good time to pick this book up, should you choose to, before all of the rumors around the Venom 3 movie start to heat things up. Number 8 on the list is Spawn's Universe issue number 1, the one-shot. And while this book is back on the list, I'm seeing that we still don't have any great data for this comic. When we dig into some of the data that is available, and I'm specifically talking about sales data here, what we see is a wide range of prices for this comic. And they range from a high of $99.99 back in August to a low of $39.99 on December 3rd. While there are some first appearances in this one-shot, I honestly don't anticipate cover A heating up in value. I don't necessarily see that happening with this specific book. I do, however, believe that there could be some energy around the 1 in 50 sketch cover variant, as well as the second print with the gold foil. So if you see those books out there, those potentially might be the books that you want to pick up, especially because I do believe the print run on this book was pretty high. Number 7 on the list is X-Men issue number 1 from 1991. And this is one of my favorite books, to be honest with you. I was collecting the X-Men back in the day and absolutely loved this series. Now, what's interesting is that this is not the only X-Men related book to be on the list. And I am curious as to whether these X-Men books are being sent in because of the announcement that the X-Men animated TV series is actually coming back. As you glance at the list, what you see are books like X-Men 1, X-Men 4, both from the 1990s, along with 2 Wolverine number 1s, with the first appearance of Gambit and Bishop also making the list. And it'll be interesting to see whether we start to see other first appearances of characters associated with that TV series back in the 90s to start to flow into CGC. Number 6 on the list is Amazing Spider-Man issue number 361, the first appearance of Carnage. And this book continues to appear on the list despite the fact that the Venom 2 movie is in our rearview mirror. With this showing, ASM 361 has appeared on the list for the last 12 months. And last month, I actually signaled that it appeared that this book was on a downward trend. And when you look at the data, you actually see that downward trend continuing. Last month, the 1-year average for this book at a 9.8 was $995. Now it's $967. The 90-day average was $838. Now it's $806. The 30-day average was $688. Now it's $652. Personally, these numbers don't bode well, in my opinion, for those people that still have copies at CGC given the turnaround time. I think that this trend is going to continue, but this is one that we're going to have to keep an eye on. And certainly, if you have copies of this book in your possession, you want to give thought as to whether this is one that you want to send in right now, given the trend that we are seeing in the data. Number 5 on the list is Moon Knight issue number 1 from 2021. And I am not at all surprised to see this book on the list given all of the excitement that currently exists for the Disney Plus show that will, I do believe, be appearing around the midway point of 2022. Data on this book is a little light, like some others that are on the list. There have been a handful of sales for cover A, ranging in price from $89.99 in September to a low of $64.95 in October to the most recent sales price of $80 in late November, all for a 9.8. My guess is that the momentum for this issue number 1 from 2021 will continue to build as we get closer and closer to the release of the show on the Disney Plus streaming platform. I took a moment to visit Hip Comic, and what I saw is that there are a healthy number of copies of the issue number 1 on the platform, both the cover A as well as some of the variants that are out there. So if this is a book that you're interested in, Hip Comic may be the way to go. Number 4 on the list, to no one's surprise, is Moon Knight issue number 1 from 1980. With this book, we actually get the first self-titled comic for Moon Knight, as well as the first ongoing series. This book is the origin of Moon Knight, along with the first appearance of Bushman and Khonshu. Given everything that is going on with this book, right, the things that I just mentioned, I'm actually surprised that there are only roughly 6,000 copies of this book on the CGC census. This book has a current FMV of $950 for a 9.8, with a 1-year average of $756, a 90-day average of $978, and a 30-day average of $896. I feel like this book has some potential, specifically at a 9.6 and above. When you look at the 9.6 and below, things start to get a little dicey. So if you have this comic in your possession, I would definitely do a dirty grade and evaluate where you fall on that spectrum, and then make a decision whether this is a book that you actually want to send in. Number 3 on the list is another Todd McFarlane book. This one, Spawn issue number 1 from 1992. This book continues to hang around the list, and it also appears to be holding value as well. When you dig into the data, what you see is that this book has an FMV and a 30-day average of just about $240, which is slightly down from the 1-year average of $254. It also has a 90-day average of $262. We'll have to see in the months ahead whether submissions and values for this comic start to slide as we move further and further away from all of the media and interviews that Todd McFarlane was doing around Spawn and Spawn's universe. Number 2 on the list is Miles Morales' Spider-Man issue number 30. And I would love to show you a picture of this comic, but unfortunately that information has not yet been released. This cover is an exclusive one from the BAM box. And according to their website, this $99.99 mystery box has completely sold out, yet they still have not released the cover. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that at some point we'll get a chance to see what this cover actually looks like. And I should mention that this is the second month in a row that this book has actually made the list. Last month, I was befuddled by the number 1 book that had been submitted in. And I'm a little less befuddled this month because it's actually the exact same book. We are talking about Ultimate Fallout issue number 4, the facsimile edition. And I think I'm less befuddled, maybe. When you dig into the data, what you see is that the data is a little light for this comic. But what we do have is some sales data. And when you look at that sales data, what you see is that the values are all over the map. On Halloween, a copy was sold for $49 at a 9.8. A day later, there was a sale for $21.50. In late November, the book was selling for roughly $55, and the most recent sale this month was for $80. The high water mark for this comic was on November 3rd, when a 9.8 sold for $120 on eBay. Again, I understand maybe why people are sending this book in, because the real copy is still relatively expensive for a modern comic. It's interesting that the values for this comic are all over the map, again, ranging from a pretty low price to what I think might be sort of expensive for a reprint. It'll be interesting to see whether this book actually makes the list moving forward. With that said, I'm going to wrap up this most recent installment of the top 10 most submitted books into CGC. Again, I want to thank our sponsor, Hip Comic, for sponsoring this series for the last several months. If you enjoyed this series, I want to encourage you to leave a comment behind, to give the video a thumbs up. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, I want to invite you to do that now. Go ahead and tap that button, turn on notifications, and that way you won't miss any of the content that comes out from my channel. If you need to reach me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.